is the Requiem Metal Podcast, episode 66, Kreator. Welcome to the Requiem Metal Podcast. I am Mark.
And I am Jason. And you just heard Storming with Menace from who, Mark?
Kreator. Isn't this our first visit to Germany?
Well, no, we did Blind Guardian.
Obscura, too.
And Obscura. Okay. But this is our first visit to the wonderful world of German thrash, which is a different breed altogether. It's much different than the American thrash.
Oh, totally.
And we'll definitely get into that quite a bit. And probably, my first German thrash band and your first German thrash band was both Kreator. And I think a lot of people probably feel that way. Maybe a few people kind of got inroads through destruction.
Sodom or something.
Very few maybe through Sodom. Yeah. But Kreator seems to be like the one that most people are the most familiar with, and obviously they have the most consistent, I guess, prolific career. In terms of
going since '83.
Yeah, since they were Tormentor.
Yeah.
And even though they had kind of some downtime in the 90s where they made some albums that no one really cares too much about, they're
still putting out albums though.
Well, they've made a comeback,
Yeah.
In the 2000s, they've actually
with what was the one in 2000 they did? Do you remember?
Violent Revolution, I feel like was the one that kind of started to bring them back, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But yeah. So the tune you just heard, "Stormy with Menace," the reason we picked that. And we'll explain the format of how we're going to kind of do all this. But the reason we picked that is it comes from Terrible Certainty, which was kind of one of their middle records of the era we're looking at, which is roughly the 80s stuff up until the early 90s. And Terrible Certainty is kind of like what you get to hear in there is a lot of different Kreator elements. You get to hear some of the like brutality of their early stuff from like kind of the first 3 records with like the guitar solo that comes in. That's just like, goes right for it. And then you also start to hear, some of the melody that they're going to really pick up and use on the stuff like Extreme Aggression and Coma Souls. So it's kind of just a nice representation, because what Mark and I decided to do, which we've done in the past before, is we each picked out 5, I do believe.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I don't think we've done this since Paradise Lost Show.
No, we did it with Carcass.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So it's been a while. Well, Satanic Slaughter, we kind of did the same thing, but it was kind of a unique format that we did for our Christmas episode.
Yeah.
But so we picked out
Satanic Offerings.
Oh, what did I say? Satanic Slaughter? Yeah, sorry.
That could be this year's.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, Christmas holiday with Slaughter. But so we decided to pick our 5 favorites out, and just in order to kind of tip the scales the right way, we actually picked Stormy with Menace as neither of ours, just as sort of a starting point to kind of build off of. But I guess before we kind of get into our choices a little bit here, tell us a little bit about why is Kreator, how is the German thrash sound different than, say, like what most people are familiar with?
Bay Area
Metallica
thrash?
and Megadeth and Slayer and stuff.
To my ear, there was not much difference between the German thrash and death metal. I think it was the first, outside of like, Possessed or Repulsion. This stuff is almost predating that as far as like having record releases and being known.
Well, Seven Churches was 84, so Possessed would have been out there.
Yeah, like Repulsion, like what a lot of people think of, as being like one of the godfathers of death metal. I think, between Sodom, Kreator, Destruction, even the Hungarian Tormentor, that's a huge influence that I don't really hear a whole lot of credit being paid to that.
Yeah, I'm truly surprised that like Decibel hasn't given a Hall of Fame out to like Pleasure to Kill or Extreme Aggression or something yet.
With how close that was. Vocally, nobody else was doing those kind of vocals at the time.
Yeah.
As far as that kind of like ferocity, but you could still understand what they're saying.
Yeah.
And musicianship was pretty over the top as well. It was more, I guess, it was more akin to like Bathory, old Bathory meets thrash.
Yeah, with some Celtic Frost.
Yeah, some Hellhammer kind of
stuff going on.
Kind of real noise.
But it was a lot more accelerated. I guess Bathory had some fast songs, especially like on The Return and
even for some of the first record's pretty fast.
Yeah, that's true. It's got the Motorhead kind of speed to it.
Yeah.
But to me, this is like a different velocity. It's got that thrash speed, but with the sort of roughness that Venom and Celtic Frost and Hellhammer type stuff had.
Musically, they're fairly similar with old Slayer stuff.
Yeah.
Not as refined. But
Exodus is a good kind of place to sort of build off of, because they had they have the thrash groove. That was the thing that, like, even though Celtic Frost on occasion could have some groovy tunes, and some catchy kind of riffs, they weren't playing thrash per se. They were doing kind of their own unique.
It was like
hybrid of something.
15-year-old kids playing Deep Purple songs.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
something like that. But
they're catchy, but they never, if they ever blasted, it was just it wasn't necessarily part of the flow of it wasn't part of the catchiness of the song. Was in the speed at all.
Sure. Whereas what you hear with the German thrash stuff is those death metal roots that you just mentioned, the sort of death influence, the Possessed, Slayer, Bathory, some of that, but mixed in with the sensibility that Exodus and Metallica had of playing really fast, just as fast as possible. Really Metallica, I guess, like Ride the Lightning kind of era. I hear elements of that in a lot of Kreator's music, but a lot of Hell Awaits kind of stuff, especially on the first couple Kreator records, which we'll get into here in a second. But the big three are Destruction, kind of Sodom, and Kreator. And I mean, I don't know, like, I guess, how would you differentiate the three? I mean,
Well, Sodom is the meat and potatoes band.
Yeah, they're kind of I don't want to say bottom feeders, but they're the least dynamic, I guess, of the three.
Yeah, they probably owe more to Celtic Frost than they do to. I mean, they're that. Actually, they're really fast, but they're not about technicality at all. It's just about rhythm and groove. And Destruction was.
And to be fair, though, Kreator in the early days sacrifices technicality for brutality. Especially like on some of that stuff. I mean, they have some melodies built in there, but a lot of their stuff, like especially.
But I would think that, at least to my ear, that Kreator is a little bit more. There's more brutality than, say, Sodom.
Yeah,
Sodom's more like pummeling. It's not quite as like razor sharp as that. And Destruction's always been, well, at least the good era of Destruction has always been about extreme technicality and speed.
Yeah, virtuoso kind of stuff. Like on Sentence of Death and Infernal Overkill. I guess I always think of Destruction. I just think of those awesome like solos and leads and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's nonstop riffs. Yeah. Or like just scales through the entire thing.
The problem with Destruction is that they were. It was sort of like a short period that they were great. From really like 84 to like 88 or so.
And then maybe 89. Mad Butcher's kind of a turd record too. It's tolerable, but beyond. I mean, that was kind of. Yeah, that's kind of it. Sentence of Death, Infernal Overkill, I think, is that they're there at their peak at that point.
For sure. And I think the one that came right after that was fairly decent. I can't, right off the top of my memory, remember what it is. I think I have it, but Release of Agony, maybe.
I think it was Mad Butcher, then Release of Agony, wasn't it?
Was the Mad Butcher? That was just an EP, I do believe. I don't think it was a full length.
I don't remember. So. Release from Agony was like that head with two hands next to it.
Yeah. So kind of cheesy covers a lot of times, a lot of the Destruction stuff, but
that was the first one I actually found on LP.
Really?
Because I'd heard Sentence of Death, and I was like, man, Sentence of Death was just an EP as well. And I heard that, I was like, God, this is unbelievable. And then I found that at some used record shop. I'm like, oh man, is this what happened after that? So
yeah.
I think SPV still has all the stuff in print though. So
for sure, yeah. I actually just got some on Amazon like last year. I had filled in a couple gaps of Destruction, but yeah, Kreator for sure. Like out of those three, has always been the most dynamic. They've been the one that I feel like when I'm introducing this to like people kind of glom onto a lot easier, like Kreator.
Yeah. Well, I think the kind of like musical structure they set up for identity they set up for themselves, it's given them the ability to actually expand.
Sure.
Because Destruction, what more can you really do?
I know.
And Sodom actually got pretty even as like people could probably slag on Tapping the Vein. It's catchy as hell.
It's not a bad record.
It's really not. I mean, the lyrics are retarded.
Yeah, Sodom's songs are always like silly.
Looking for new body parts.
Bommenhagel, I have no idea what the hell that song was about, and it was just so over the top catchy, and like Nuclear Winter and Outbreak of Evil. I mean, they've got some cuts that are pretty cool. I don't know if they could carry a whole show per se, but
I think they could.
You think they could?
Oh yeah.
I guess I'd have to explore like Agent Orange and some of that stuff.
Yeah, you need to. I haven't listened to a lot of this stuff, for quite a while. So
maybe down the road when we run out of show ideas, we'll throw Sodom to Destruction. Definitely good, I think. Yeah, there you go. But anyways, getting back to Kreator, what the main thing with Kreator in their early years is they're a 3-piece, and that was one of the things you pointed out that's interesting about the German thrash thing. Is
they're all power trios.
All power trios, which I think is a testament to like how they weren't as focused on the guitar virtuoso. Destruction which was weird, even though they're a trio, but like their songs weren't complex. They weren't writing Master of Puppets and Justice for All, Rust in Peace. They weren't writing like these long, epic, multi-movement kind of things. It was just pounding, and they play some brutal leads over top, but it was more like Exodus kind of like brutal leads or something.
Well, and some of these early Kreator leads, it's nothing more than him playing one string guitar really fast.
Kind of making up for the fact that they didn't have a lot of skill in these early days. You know what I mean, and kind of covering up.
But they definitely had enthusiasm. That's, I think, they definitely made up for it. Just like Immortal, like that's how they got their sound.
And I think Slayer did the same thing. You could say say, with like Show No Mercy and Honey in the Chapel. I mean, they made up for the fact that they weren't, like, they weren't Kirk Hammett,
well, Kerry King's even come out on that and, said that, I don't know, I just play fast music winning bar.
Yeah, exactly. And it worked.
I couldn't tell you what these notes are, but I know what sounds right.
I think the cool thing about Kreator and about even the German thrash thing is their influence. I don't think a lot of people knew who they were influencing until about the mid-'90s, and then it kind of became apparent when bands like Dark Tranquillity, In Flames, At the Gates,
the could be seen as a precursor, especially the kind of vocals that were coming out post the Stockholm Swedish death metal stuff. That kind of high register vocal, and even in some of the early Kreator records you can hear that tremolo Swedish kind of picking, but is more melody than say like Left Hand Path.
Sure. Yeah, because I mean, you couldn't say that like you could draw a direct line from Kreator to like Skydancer. I mean, it's no, not but that easy. But
they're definitely I think they're definitely in the deep roots of Dark Tranquillity's influence.
Yep. Yeah, and that was odd because I discovered Kreator I think before Dark Tranquillity, and then when I started reading that, it didn't make sense at first until I started to like delve a little bit deeper into Kreator and kind of you listen to the melodies that you get in like Coma Souls and Extreme Aggression. You're like, okay, it's brutal death metal type stuff, but it's got the melodic elements.
But it's got hooks and everything. Yeah.
And Metallica was never doing the brutal like vocals. Slayer wasn't doing the brutal vocals, but they had the speed and the velocity that Dark Tranquillity had, but it was like Kreator added that last like weird element of like death. It
was like that last kind of link to lead up to where death metal started.
Yeah. So, and that's
I think Milla's vocals are definitely more death metal centric than the dude from Possessed. What was it? Jeff Cabrera, is that his name?
I think so.
I don't know how I'm pulling these out of my butt right now, but
Jeff something. I know that.
Yeah.
I know Larry Lalonde was the guitar player because he went on playing Primus. So, but and speaking of Millie was the vocalist and the lead guitar player. Ventor is the drummer. And then
I think he's basically been the drummer the entire tenure of the band except for a couple years here and there.
Like 96 or 95 or something like that. And then Rob was the bass player pretty much from at least the era we're covering, I think, for the most part. Rob's in there. And then there will be a second guitar player that will be added on
Coma of Souls. It was Frank, I believe, or Extreme Aggression.
Frank came in, but there was actually a guy that played on Frank comes in on Coma Souls, you're right. But there was a guy like Triste or something who played on Extreme Aggression and maybe Terrible Certainty. Because they were a 3-piece for like their first 3 records or so. Yeah. So up through Flag of Hate, I think. Flag of Hate was their last the EP
power trio thing.
So I think he just maybe played on Extreme Aggression. The other guy, Triste, I want to say. Unfortunately, I don't have the CD in front of me. I can't find them. And Mark forgot to bring them when we got together. I think they're stuck in my classroom somewhere. But we're gonna start by playing a cut that Mark picked out, "Total Death" from Endless Pain, which is their debut. Came out October '85 is when the record came out. I mean, what are some of the things that you could tell us about this song?
Right off the bat, you'll hear the Mad Butcher almost riff.
Yeah, from Destruction.
It's very, very similar. He doesn't quite do the little noodling thing at the end of it that Schmear does, but
chorus you hear Strike of the Beast from Exodus a little bit too.
But I mean, this is it's pretty straight up brutal. I mean, it reminds me of like old Bathory or old just old Swedish like thrash.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, there's not a whole lot. I mean, it's fairly akin to like some later Dark Throne stuff too. Just almost borderline black metal.
And this is actually a more groovy tune than what you hear on a lot of Endless. A lot of the stuff on Pleasure to Kill and Endless Pain. I think if there was a criticism of those 2 records, it's some of the songs are just too fast for too many songs in a row, and a lot of the songs kind of bleed together. And to me, when they
kind of monotonous.
Slow it down, like the songs we're going to hear, like Total Death, and then my choice from Pleasure to Kill, which is Riot of Violence, which is more a mid-paced tune. To me, you warm up easier to Kreator. I mean, you can only listen to stuff as fast as Ripping Corpse so many times. Which is the opening cut of Pleasure to Kill. And
I think, Rain and Blood's got enough variation that it, kind of breaks up that,
29 minutes.
29 minutes.
Yeah.
Why don't they ever make records that length anymore?
I don't know.
But because some of these Kreator records are just, it's almost, effort to listen to them straight through.
Once you get through like track 8 or 9 from Pleasure to Kill, and then you got like a 6-minute song, track 9, I mean, you're kind of like worn out a little bit. You you're kind of done listening, and that's why we'll talk about some of the later records. Mark's favorite and mine are right next to each other, and there's a common thing that links them together, and I think part of it is streamlining the sound a little bit and just writing more straightforward songs, really.
Yeah.
Which is what you get with the Extreme Aggression, Coma Souls era, you know.
Well, I think they learned how to write songs.
Yeah, I think at this point they're just throwing his kitchen sink approach.
I think they're young kids that are, you know, trying to like outdo one another, just like Swedish death metal scene was, how the thrash scene was.
Sure, absolutely. So in this first set, what we're going to hear is Cut from Mark from Endless Pain, and then Riot of Violence from Pleasure to Kill, which is their second full-length record, and that's one of my picks. And then we're going to close things out with Mark's second pick, which is a tune called Flag of Hate, and we'll talk about Pleasure to Kill and Flag of Hate when we come back. So enjoy Total Death.
Try to run, hide, like a death.
Flag of Hate.
From the Flag of Hate EP from 1986. And it was kind of funny because Mark and I were talking about Flag of Hate, and then we went and kind of just, when we were playing it, the version we played, Mark was kind of like, wait, which one is this? Because you had been listening to the original version, which was from Endless Pain, right?
Yeah.
Which is a little... What's the difference between the re-recorded one and the one from Endless Pain?
I think the one of Endless Pain is a little bit more... they slow down just a little bit, and you can hear a little bit more guitar noodling and stuff in the background.
Sure. And the thing I notice about not just Flag of Hate in particular, or not just the newer version, but just the EP in general in this era of Kreator, is lower vocals. Mm-hmm. Vocals are kind of getting a little bit lower, and also it's a little, like you said, faster. It's more streamlined. There's less noodling and that sort of stuff.
On this song, it was like, I mean, if you just listen to the riff itself, it's actually fairly melodic, but then you throw Ventor's drumming on it, it's just a dum 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 dum. That's what adds the brutality to it, and almost monotonous to some degree. But
yeah, Ventor's he's an interesting drummer. I mean, he's a little off, kind of like in the way
he's an intuitive drummer. Like there's you can find this on YouTube. Maybe I can even put this along with the show notes. But when they're recording for Hordes of Chaos, the latest record that just came out this year, Ventor is getting pissed off playing with the click track because it doesn't feel right to him.
Yeah, so he's
more of an intuitive player.
Feel. Yeah, and he reminds me in the same way that what's the drummer for My Name Bride, Andy?
The original one?
Yeah. What's his name?
Rick was the original.
Rick? Okay, yeah. Kind of how Rick played a little bit off from what a lot of traditional
so
drummers.
Did Jonas when he was drumming for Cat.
Yeah, and Jonas and even Ken Owens to some extent. Some of the choices he made were really off for Carcass, and I'm not saying that Ventor's as good as those guys.
I think he's now
in capacity. Yeah, probably now. Back then, he was pretty rough, but I mean, he kind of added that. He was more just about brutalness.
Yeah, I mean, and if you all of Flag of Hate, there's no drum fills. No. There's some cymbal hits, and then it's just dun 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 through the whole thing.
And we were trying to put these together. And I mean, really, the only places we can go is to the Bathory, Venom,
and I'd say early, like pre, like the Scandinavian Metal Assault, like Crawl Dear Cross, and that era of Bathory.
Just super brutal. And so it's weird that I don't know what was influencing or penetrating into Germany at the time. I don't know what they were listening to besides the Slayers and Exoduses, which I'm sure they probably had access to. I don't know. Do you know were they an East German or West German band? I'm assuming West.
I'm pretty sure they're West,
just because of the access. Something that didn't even occur to me.
So, yeah, I'm almost positive.
Okay, yeah. I just got back from Germany not too long back, and we actually did like a little art project where we had to paint pieces.
Did you write Kreator on it?
No, I did do some Slayer graffiti. We had to paint pieces of the wall for the 20th anniversary celebration. They're going to have like famous celebrities like knock down pieces of these.
How much of it's left?
Wall. Well, they're going to put them in the gaps where the wall is, but these were actually like giant kind of... They're not actually literal pieces of the wall, but you're painting graffiti on them and stuff. So there's quite a bit of it.
So you're turning this separation line into something of celebration.
Yeah, and they're gonna have like celebrities come and push them over like dominoes. So you'll like
what kind of like David Hasselhoff?
Yeah. So if you see one with a little Slayer logo on there and a pink sailboat, which is one of my students painted on there for graffiti, and that's Requiem Metal Podcast sponsored. But so it hadn't even occurred to me that the where some of the influences were maybe coming into for Kreator and whether they had access to some of that stuff, Yeah,
because like with somebody like Vader, being in communist Poland or whatever.
Yeah.
And I mean that what was it, 10 years ago? 12 years ago that
the wall came down?
Well, for Poland.
Oh, 20. Still 20, 89,
20?
90. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, pretty much for everyone, it's like 89.
And even
91.
after that, there was always like really sketchy stuff with the mail, and I did a little bit of correspondence back and forth with Peter from Vader, and they got influence wherever they could get it.
Sure.
And they almost kind of worked in a vacuum, yeah.
And that makes, you wonder, what, when you watch like that Global Metal DVD, and they talk about how in Japan, the one band, it wasn't Black Sabbath that penetrated, but it was Deep Purple, because Deep Purple went and did actually live shows in Japan.
Yeah.
So every metal band that came out of Japan's primary influence was Deep Purple, not Judas Priest or Black Sabbath.
They all had keyboards.
Yeah, and so it's kind of funny, and so you wonder when you get into some of the Eastern European and the communist, just the different influences and what kind of gets where.
Because then, you go to like Switzerland and they have their own unique style. I mean, even like to this day, I mean, you've got, Celtic Frost, Hellhammer, but then what about bands, Samael and then Elastis, they have a very similar sound, which is kind of bizarre.
The Swiss sound.
I know.
And there's the German
sound of confidence and lots of money.
I guess, yeah. Whiteville, It's like the whitest place I've ever been in Europe, that's for sure. And then previous to that was Riot of Violence. I think there was a Riot of Violence going on outside there behind us. And Pleasure to Kill, I guess the thing you could say about Pleasure to Kill coming off of Endless Pain is it's more refined. It's a little more in your face. If you were to listen to a couple other tunes from Pleasure to Kill, you'd hear tunes like The Pestilence and Ripping Corpse, which are both just like pummeling, like relentless. Riot of Violence, I think I mentioned last Talkset I chose because it's a little bit more mid-pace. But again, the Exodus kind of feel is there and stuff like that. But after Flag of Hate, I feel like Flag of Hate is like the EP. It's a 3-song EP that was put out in '86, and to me that seems like a real line of demarcation. That's sort of the end of like the sort of early era of
the barbarity.
Yeah, the barbarity. And now what they're going to do is they're going to make a pretty strong attempt to bring in some of those melodic elements that you hear in a lot of the later Kreator kind of stuff. And that brings us back to the record that we started the whole show off with, which is one you're not terribly familiar with, no pun intended, and that's Terrible Certainty, which was released in 1987, right? That was one you don't... Do you have that one?
No, I don't. I just got it.
Okay.
Or I ordered it.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is one that I picked up at one of the Metal Fests. I was probably with you when we bought it, and I think I'd read a little bit about it, and people who were into Extreme Aggression were like, "Oh, you gotta check out Terrible Certainty." I think when I bought it, I was sort of like underwhelmed a bit by it, but as I've kind of gone back over the years and put it on and kind of digested it a little bit more slowly, it has its pleasantries, its sort of subtleties.
I think, if you've got more of a refined ear, if you listen to this stuff for a while, you can pick more out of it than it just being kind of a wash of noise.
Sure. I mean, Pleasure to Kill, the first time you hear it, if you're like a Slayer fan, you'll appreciate the Slayer-isms of it and how intense it is, but you're not really like hearing a lot of the dynamicism, And
no, not at all.
Terrible Certainty has some of that same element. I think, they're really trying to up the ante compositionally. And just like you heard in Storming with Menace, it's like there's this fight going on between the brutal old days of Pleasure to Kill and the barbarity mixed with like this, let's get some,
let's do some
melodic influence. Yeah. Let's write some real songs, I think the other thing you see too is a lyrical shift. A lot of fantasy stuff, especially with the covers on Endless Pain and Pleasure to Kill, kind of a...
Well, and actually that dude appears on most of their covers.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Not so recently, but he was like their Eddie or something. Okay. I don't know if he actually had a name, but he's the dude on Coma Soul.
He's the dude on Terrible Certainty as well. He's kind of standing there like posing. I guess I never really thought about that. Yeah, he is there. Yeah, that's weird. But even there's more of fantasy element to the way that he's used on the first two Kreators.
Yeah, and the other stuff starts getting more political as we go on.
I was going to say they start talking about pollution and religion and things like that on Terrible Certainty. And to me, this is where like they're growing up record. We can't keep talking about
this point.
Ripping corpses and it's like Death and some of these other bands that we've
Zombie Ritual. Okay,
yeah, you can only write that song for 2 or 3 records before you get bored.
Unless you're Obituary.
Well, yeah, unless you're Obituary or Cannibal Corpse or something. But Blind Faith is the tune that I chose to pick off this. It opens the whole album up, and it's just a really kind of punchy, in your face tune that's got a lot of these elements that I think are going to be more prominent in the later stuff from Kreator. So we're going to go from that, and then this is actually an odd set because this is the Jason set.
Hey, it's all right.
So I got 3 in a row. Be fair. Mark had 2 last set, so I get 3 here. So I'll get Blind Faith from Terrible Certainty, and then a pair of tunes from Extreme Aggression, the title track and Betrayer, and we'll talk a lot more about Extreme Aggression when we come back. So enjoy Blind Faith.
Driven the young and the old, all those waiting for the new Messiah. Blood for minds, the massacre has begun. Let's leave you alone. Why does God have you now? We're stripping off the mark, watching this last black way to get set. A miracle, but it's the vision of the rain. As the sophisticated, you're lost without your miracle. Black faith.
Betrayer.
That was Betrayer. And Extreme Aggression before that. And like I said, we started things off with Blind Faith.
Probably their worst cover.
What's that?
Extreme Aggression.
Yeah, it's a pretty...
It's like an Andy Warhol thrash cover or something.
Yeah, it's a pretty stupid cover.
I don't know if that's how all of them were, or if that's the American version, but...
Yeah, that's the only cover I've ever seen.
That's almost like the Cathedral Supernatural Birth Machine cover.
Yeah. You know, it's a pretty bad cover, too, that came out before Extreme Aggression was that Out of the Past, Into the Dark EP.
Oh, I like that. Out of the Dark into Light, the head that's like in blood.
Really? I think it looks like a
it's
high school freshman kind of.
But I like the imagery.
Yeah, it's a cool like concept, I guess.
Yeah.
But Extreme Aggression's worse. You're right. And this record came out in '89, and I guess obviously I have a lot to say. But what are your thoughts on Extreme Aggression?
That's the first one I got.
Okay.
The first one I picked up on tape. I think this was one that Chris might have been familiar with because actually.
This is the one Chris turned me on to in the late 90s.
I think he had a couple of the earlier ones because for some reason, at least where we were at, like the whole skater crowd had some kind of weird in with Kreator, and everybody loves Slayer.
Yeah,
I think it's about the speed and like
there is a lot of Slayer.
There's similar imagery as well.
Sure,
kind of over the top stuff. So that was the first one I got, and upon first listening to it, I was like, this is kind of monotonous.
Sure. Back
in the day when I hadn't heard a ton of really extreme metal.
And not just that, but like you're coming out of probably the Bay Area thrash stuff, which was all about dynamicism and, Megadeth and Metallica and, I mean, epic songwriting. And
well, at the time, when did this come out? 89?
89.
I don't think I got it till 9. I think I got it... Actually, I think I got Coma Souls, and then after I loved Coma Souls, I went right back out and got Extreme Aggression. I think Chris had it before.
And that's an odd progression to go into. I mean, it works. Those two are kind of companion pieces, but to me, that's like Coma Souls is like the South of Heaven, and Extreme Aggression is like the Rain and Blood.
I don't
know. In terms of like Coma Souls, to me is a lot more unique songwriting.
Yeah,
it's a lot more diversity of the songs, and where South of Heaven has all those diversities of slow, mid-pace, fast. Whereas Rain and Blood is like
I guess they're kind of their own things. Just Rain and Blood's always touted as like
sure
best metal record.
Well, I just meant in terms of like Extreme Aggression. Every song sounds like the same almost. Like there's a sound.
It's almost the same pace.
The same pace. It's almost the same warmth and the same tone to every song. Mm-hmm. Like you can kind of listen to one after another and not really know what song you're listening to. And that's like the first couple times I listened to Rain and Blood, I was like, what the hell song is this? It just sounded like one song kind of going forward, Whereas like I meant with South of Heaven and Coma Souls is like every song sounds unique.
That's where the songwriting really started to come.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I meant with the comparison, And that's the cool thing about Extreme Aggression. That I'm kind of endeared to it because it's the first one that I ever got. But to me, it's like really their most perfect. In my opinion, you might disagree because you're a Coma Souls guy. It's kind of the perfect blend of the melody and aggression. It's just sort of like almost perfectly balanced. Whereas I think on Coma Souls, they kind of tip the scales more into the melody and songwriting, which isn't a bad thing. I'm just saying
it's kind of a clear division of they're kind of leaving the past behind with Coma Souls. I think
this is like the last.
I mean, it's like Sepultura Rise compared to Beneath the Remains.
Yeah,
it's that kind of progression.
Yeah. I mean, and both great records. I mean, Arise and Beneath the Remains are both killer. It's like I don't know. It's hard to compare the two. They're just both great. And if you were gonna start,
because there's been like looking around online, there's been a lot of positive stuff for Coma Souls, but I've heard a lot of people slag it in the past. Mm-hmm. Like it's commercial, and you go, it's not. You listen to what is this relating to this commercial?
I think those are the people who are probably still stuck in the Pleasure to Kill, Terrible 70 phase.
That could be, I guess.
I mean, there's some people that can't leave behind the past. At some level.
The true people.
Well, I'm sure there are people there are probably Slayer fans that didn't want Seasons of Abyss to be dynamic and melodic and slow, who are pissed about that. I've never met those people, but I bet they're out there. They're living 1986 still or something.
I think that was something that I got over by the time I was like 20.
Yeah.
I'm more interested to see a band, unless it's like Bolt Thrower. I don't want to see Bolt Thrower do a prog record, but,
exactly.
But like bands that clearly have a pretty kind of long career ahead of them, and they're pretty varied like from the get go.
Yeah.
Like with Catatonia, I don't want for Funerals to come for 6 albums.
No, as great as that was, it's kind of a one and done thing. You know, like keep moving forward.
Yeah, so I'm really willing to give bands a lot of latitude. Like, you know, Paradise Lost in the '90s, you know, did 1 Second, which is nobody can say that's a crap record. But even Host and, you know, Believe in Nothing, and they had a little bit of a, I don't know, wandering off period there in My Dying Bride, but I just give a lot of latitude to bands that I really are into, so that's...
But the thing is I mean, as much as we say something like that, it's hard to get mad at the people who are pissed about Coma of Souls, because right after Coma of Souls, a lot of Kreator fans get pretty pissed with the experimental choices that Kreator goes on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I mean,
Renewal...
I'm not calling us hypocritical, but I'm just saying it's like...
Well,
you get to Renewal cause a conflict. I mean, that stuff's hard to get into, you know? I mean,
yeah, because I think Extreme Aggression and Coma of Souls, I think Coma of Souls is like the peak of what they were going to do. And then if they really wanted to diverge off, that's why I don't see Coma of Souls quite as divisive as a lot of people think. But Cause for Conflict and what was the other one?
Outcast and Renewal and Endorama. And I mean, there's some rough stuff.
I remember getting Renewal and just like, why is he doing this with his vocals? He can't sing. Why is he trying to sing? Yeah. He's got a great raspy voice.
Exactly.
Anytime you hear his voice, you can identify it immediately. He's got that weird thing to it that he always does after. He's almost like the James Hetfield kind of thing. For sure. But just more raspy.
No, I'm with you. You know, we'll talk a little bit more about that after in our last set. But you know, again, when you go to like with the stuff with Extreme Aggression, and we're about to jump into a Coma of Souls set here. You know, Extreme Aggression has the title track alone has those, you know, that breakdown, that Society, What Have You Done For Me, and just like, I mean, Venter's just really hitting a nice pace.
Not only lyrically are they doing something different, but Mill's actually playing around with vocal patterns, and this is like the first time I think.
And there's almost like catchy sing-along kind of parts where you can kind of like...
It's almost like a rap breakdown to not quite, but it's that kind of...
It has a rhythmic groove to it, you know, that you can kind of lock into.
Yeah, which is actually kind of helps offset Ventor's just beating the hell out of the drums all the time.
Which he just does, you know. But, you know, even like the solos and stuff like that are starting to get more complex, and so you have to give Mill credit for starting to like up his game with the lead guitar playing.
Yeah.
You know, I think Betrayer and Extreme Aggression are two of the more melodic songs on the record, and feature some pretty good solos for Kreator. I mean, those are probably amongst the best that they had up to that point. Betrayer, I think, was a single too, and there's a lot of fanfare to Betrayer. I know Chris, that's the song Chris always talks about. That's like his favorite, so, you know, Chris, enjoy Betrayer. But, you know, then when we get into Coma of Souls, they add a second guitar player. A new guy named Frank. I think they had this Triste guy.
They added a second guitar player that actually, I think, filled up the sound more. Because that's, you go back and listen almost, even, you know, Extreme Aggression with another guitar player, it's kind of narrow. And there's not a whole lot of bottom end to the sound.
I agree.
And Coma of Souls, that's, the bass got a little bit fuller, the guitar got a little warmer.
Sure.
And I think Miller's vocals got even harsher on that for a lot of the
record. Bit, yeah.
More
especially
high register
on Coma of Souls.
Yeah, where he screams at the end.
Yeah. And you know, it's an interesting record too, because I think you're also getting they're really starting to lock into the mid-paced songs.
Yeah.
You know, two of the songs that you picked out for this set are two of the best mid-paced songs on the record, which is Hidden Dictator and People of the Lie. You know, Coma of Souls is a more kind of in-your-face, like Extreme Aggression type tune.
Yeah.
Which is the one I picked.
Then the way that
you have like the mid-paced stuff.
Well, they have some faster bits in them as well. But even like the opening cut is when the sky turns red. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
I mean, it's just like this acoustic interlude thing, which we haven't heard that in the beginning of a Kreator record ever.
And to me, that's they're really kind of paying attention, I think, to what the Bay Area stuff was starting to do, and kind of paying.
Well, I think
Metallica and Megadeth.
Yeah, between you've got, you know, like Injustice for All
in '88,
Rust in Peace,
which is the same year as Coma of Souls.
This record, and
even Seasons of the Abyss.
And Seasons of the Abyss. I mean, this was like in the Arise came out at the same time. This was like when all these like kind of semi-established bands were like really putting their A game out there and like
starting to spread their wings creatively.
And as far you put all those records side by side, and that's pretty unbelievable for a couple year period.
Yeah. I mean, the late '90s or late '80s, excuse me, was a pretty, you know,
Anthrax Persistence of Time was there too.
Yeah. So, It was kind of right before the sort of grunge revolution kicked in. Like
it was like everything was at its peak, and then everybody got kicked in the balls, and then death metal came in.
Simplified, and then death metal kind of came in and saved them, and then
grunge. You think this is depressing? Wait till you hear this.
Yeah. Well, then when death metal kind of petered out by like 93, 94, Dark Throne and the Emperor and the gang came in and just.
Just when you thought it wasn't grim enough, here comes Burzum, great.
So, but anyways, so there is a distinctive difference you're going to hear compared to what you just heard with Extreme Aggression and the next set with Coma Souls. But
and distinct in production as well.
Yeah, I think this is the best produced Kreator of this era. I think some of the stuff in the 90s.
I think it sounds better than the stuff in the 2000s.
Do you like it better?
It has more of a it doesn't, anytime like stuff is a little bit, it's too slick. At least with current productions, you get a little bit of Abyss Studio kind of slickness to it.
The late 90s.
This seems, since it was in the early 90s, or 1990, probably recording 89, all analog to tape, I'm sure, and it's got a little bit more of that warmth, that classic kind of sound that a lot of those records from that era had.
Especially those old great thrash records.
Yeah.
Yep. So, any reason, like Coma Souls, I know the reason that I picked this tune, which is what we're gonna start things off with, is I was telling Mark, I took an audio production class and I had to put together kind of like a sound collage of different movie clips and music and stuff, and I kind of end the whole thing. It's like a 16-minute clip, and I end the whole thing with the end of Coma Souls. And so I spent like 6 hours with this song, like piecing it together over and over again. You'd think I'd hate the song,
pre-digital,
but I'm kind of endeared to the ending of the song when they kind of do the
the flurry of guitars, and
they do the mid-pace part where he's like dun dun, dun in the dun, and he's almost kind of like and then it like stops, and then like one speaker cuts out and the guitar comes in, and then the second speaker comes in, and then he does the Coma of Souls, just really goes for it. That's a cool ending. So that's why I picked this song. But what about Hidden Dictator and People Alive? He
screams at both the end of mine too. So
so we like the end.
He screams People Alive and Hidden Dictator, and then screams off that at the end as well. But no, these are People Alive is a pretty diverse track.
I was gonna say, tell us about. To me, I think this one needs discussion because it's probably the most dynamic song they've written to this point.
And it was I think it was a single, and it was also a video on Headbangers Ball back in the day, and it was one of the most outright, at least to my eyes at the time, outright political song that I'd ever seen a video for on television. Nonetheless, about like
a German anti-Nazi song is pretty powerful.
And before that, we really don't, at least in mainstream videos, you really don't see much of that. Maybe a little bit of Megadeth sneering at something, but it wasn't as blatant. Everybody knows about the Nazis and what the atrocities that happen, and I think to have a German band step up and say something about it at the time seemed powerful to me as a kid,
Sure, yeah.
And just the diverse. This is definitely probably the most diverse song on the record. It kind of shows the whole scope of what these guys were about and what they could do.
And it also shows to me like how important getting Frank into the band was. Because he to me he adds this whole new layer of melodicism and songwriting and maturity that the band really, I don't even know if they've ever come back to from this point on, So
I don't know. It's kind of similar with Slayer. How after Seasons, that was like, man, you should just break up because you're never going to do anything that good again.
Even though I like the stuff after,
I like some of the later on stuff, but it's not.
It's just not the same.
It's not the same. The same with like the new. Even though we're going to play one off Enemy of God. Great record, really catchy, but it's not as classic as Coma Souls in my mind.
I don't pull out the 2000 stuff as much as I put on Extreme Aggression.
I'm sitting around drawing all day at the desk, so I listen to crap. I'll listen to an entire, like, say, for instance, one day I'll listen to every Paradise Lost album in a row. And I didn't want to get up, and I had the remastered version of Gothic and the old one, so I got to hear every song on the album twice.
Played them back to back.
Yes.
Nice. That's pretty funny. Yeah, so I unfortunately...
So I've probably listened to Enemy of God and Hordes of Chaos, the new records, probably 15 to 20 times each.
Really?
Yeah.
That's probably about 12 more times than I listen to them. So, unfortunately, I don't get that opportunity. That's cool, though, that you get to kind of delve into it that much. But, anyways, let's hear some Coma Souls. So, we got a trio, Coma Souls, Hidden Dictator, and People Alive. So, enjoy. was People of the Lie, Hidden Dictator, and Coma of Souls. And as we mentioned before, we're going to pretty much skip over all the 1990s stuff. They put out Renewal, Cause for Conflict, Outcast, Endorama, and then they kind of get things going with Violent Revolution in the year 2000.
But this is our top 5. This is our favorites, so we didn't want to put in ones that aren't our favorites.
So, and we're ending with one last favorite, which is
Impossible Brutality from from Enemy of God, which is
2005, I do believe that was put out.
Yeah,
and it's the leads on it are very Arch Enemy kind of, and very
Mike Ahmad
Swedish.
Actually play. I think he does solos on 2 songs. I couldn't tell you right off the top of my head.
I'm sure he was hugely influenced by the German thrash.
Oh,
stuff,
I'm sure.
The Arch Enemy stuff, and even the way he played on Heartwork. I hear Kreator kind of stuff in there too. So. But let us know. These were our favorites. If you have some favorites that maybe we missed, shoot us an email at requiempodcast@gmail.com or check out the website.
Is requiempodcast.com. Leave us a review on iTunes. That'd be sweet. Give us a plug in your blog or tell some friends to listen. That'd be awesome.
Cool. So for Requiem Metal Podcast, I'm Jason.
And I'm Mark, and this is Impossible Brutality.